When you know your underlying story dynamics, it answers so many questions for you, it can help you write your work in progress. You'll know, what does my avatar want? What do they need? Why do they want it? Why does it matter to them? You'll know what the dig down deeper must include in order for it to be the ultimate test, and you'll know what your audience wants to feel. I'm Jule Kucera, creator and founder of StoryJoules, and also this particular way of looking at story dynamics. I help writers craft powerful stories. For example, Judith Barnes, a participant in StoryJoules Mastery, said, "I'm in a cohort with writers who are struggling, and I keep thinking, you guys should go see Jule." Back in the day, when we went to a video store to rent a movie, if we had gone to rent Gladiator, we probably would have gone to the action section. But Gladiator is not primarily an action movie, even though there is a lot of action. The question is, what's motivating all that action? Typically, this is where I mention downloading the StoryJoules handbook, but I have something special and different for you today. Something new, it is the Story Dynamics Quick Guide. It's 10 to 12 pages, and it has what you need to diagnose the story dynamics in any story. In this video, we're going to diagnose the story dynamics at play, and that will help us learn how story dynamics work. The next 3 videos will each be looking at story dynamics in more depth. In episode 11, we'll be looking at the 4 internal dynamics. In episode 12, the 4 external story dynamics, and episode 13, the 4 external community story dynamics. And if you've never heard of community dynamics before, that's very possible because I created it, and it's an opportunity to see what you think of it. First, let's get clear on some terminology. The word genre has many definitions in writing and publishing. It's used in marketing to describe the balance of plot versus prose, with commercial being more plot-focused and literary being more prose-focused and upmarket being somewhere in the middle. It's also used in marketing to describe a particular age group, such as adult, young adult, or what school grade. It's also used in marketing to describe the setting, fantasy, sci-fi, historical. Those descriptions all help sell a book. They help books get to the readers who want that kind of book, but they don't help you write it. Genre is also used to refer to the content of the story. What's it about? And that does help you write it. Norman Friedman wrote about this in an article called Forms of the Plot. Robert McKee has talked about it, and he's quoted or mentioned in Sean Coyne's book. Sean Coyne wrote The Story Grid, which includes genres, and John Truby wrote The Anatomy of Genres. Both of those books are excellent. I highly recommend them both. I just have a slightly different take on them. Rather than listing genres, my preference is to relate them to the underlying dynamics of the story, that external and internal dimension we've been talking about. That external dimension of order and chaos, the internal dimension of stasis and change. These 2 dimensions are the basis for the content genres, but I'm giving this usage of genres a different name, and it's not because I wanted to create a new name, honestly. It's because I was talking about this on a webinar with Jane Friedman, and it caused so much confusion because anybody who missed my initial introduction explaining the use of the word was completely confused. And so I said, why are we using one word to mean many different things? Let's get a different word. And so I'm using story dynamics. From here on out, story dynamics will mean what it describes, and it won't be confused with other definitions. Remember, the foundation of story is order and chaos, and the chaos pressuring our avatar to change internally. They might not, but the pressure comes from the chaos. The type of external pressure exerted, that gives us the 4 external story dynamics. The type of change being demanded internally gives us the 4 internal story dynamics. So that gets us a total of 8 story dynamics so far. There will be 4 more external story dynamics that are based on a special condition of the external chaos. We'll look more deeply at the 4 internal story dynamics in episode 11, the 4 external in episode 12, and the special 4 external in episode 13. But before we do that, the best way to understand what is a story dynamic is to use it to diagnose a story. When we use a tool, then we understand what it's for, what it does. The story that we'll use for our diagnosis is, of course, Gladiator, because we know it so well. So we don't have to talk about what happens in the story. We know what happens in the story, so we can just focus on the dynamics at play. Because the StoryJoules model is the story of how an avatar chooses to change or not, I like to start with the internal view, the internal dynamics. We've said the theme of Gladiator is what can one man do, what can one person do as they demonstrate strength and honor. So the question is, how is the avatar pressured to change? Are they pressured to change their view of themselves, their view of their own worthiness? Are they pressured to change their view of the world? Are they pressured to change their responsibility to others? Are they pressured to change their sacrifice, their willingness to or to not sacrifice for love? As we think about Gladiator, there are lots of questions about Maximus's view of himself. He is a worthy person, but he keeps being put in positions that cause him to question or potentially reduce his worth. He starts out as a general, and yet he's not free to leave the army to go be with his family. He then is captured and enslaved, so he's lower in value there, from society at any rate. And then he becomes a gladiator whose life is used for entertainment. So all of those could trigger questions of self-worth. Because Maximus moves from great to legendary, we admire how he handles all these demotions. He's also tested in his sacrifice for love. It's kind of backwards, because his sacrifice for love would be to stay alive. That would be a sacrifice because he really wants to die to go be with his family. So it's the reverse of what you might typically think, but that is a pressure for him. I happen to view the pressure on the internal view of himself as greater because we see more of it throughout the movie. Yes, the love element is there, and it's not as prevalent as the pressure on the self-worth. So that gives us a validation story. The sacrifice for love gives us a love story dynamic. Their view of the world would be a worldview story dynamic, and their responsibility to others would be a horror story dynamic. I could give it a different word, but this is displayed through horror stories that have elements of supernatural and what is my obligation to others. In this movie, we have Maximus confronting Commodus and ending his life in justice. That is where he feels external pressure. That is the ultimate test of his external pressure. So where does Maximus feel it? Does he feel it in his body? Does he feel it in his experience of injustice? Does he feel it in his experience of evil? And does he feel it in his relationships? In Gladiator, Maximus feels it all over the place. We interrupt this broadcast so that I can disagree with myself. In this video, I say Commodus is not evil. While it's true that he's not supernaturally evil, he is horrifically evil. He goes beyond the crime of breaking the legal code to annihilate the moral code. He shows complete depravity toward others, including his father, his sister, and his nephew. I'll say more about this in a future video, but for now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. The fact that he just got away with murder, not just any old murder, but killing the emperor and stealing that position. So Maximus feels it in all three of those places. When the avatar feels it in their body, that's an action story dynamic. When they feel it in their experience of injustice, that's crime. When they feel it in their experience of evil, that's horror. And when they feel it in their relationships, that's love. Those are the four sources of external pressure on an individual. But Gladiator often also shows people in groups experiencing pressure. Those groups can be a group of soldiers, a group of peasants. You see the juxtaposition of Lucilla riding in a hand-carried platform while there's these throngs of peasants around her begging for money. There's groups of gladiators experiencing the pressure of being killed for entertainment. There's royalty who are free from much pressure, and there are senators who are kind of somewhere in the middle there. The question is, does the avatar's community feel this pressure? And by community, I mean The avatar is a member of a specific community that is experiencing that pressure together. It's not a random group of people. It's because they belong to this community that they're experiencing the pressure. Because Maximus is a soldier, he cannot leave of his own accord. And for examples of community that feel pressure, you can use any of the ways that people are othered: gender, ethnicity, race, country of origin, physical ability, neurodivergent, you name it. We're very good at othering, unfortunately. But that is the question here. Where does Maximus feel pressure? Much of the pressure for Maximus, yes, he feels pressure in his body as a soldier and as a gladiator, and much of that pressure because it's an unjust society. We've got a murderer as the emperor. Does the community experience pressure from their experience of evil because in terms of supernatural horror? Or do they feel it through their relationships? So for Gladiator, it's heavily their experience of injustice. Yes, it affects their body, but it's because of an unjust system. When a community experiences pressure via their body physically, that's a war story dynamic. Two countries, two tribes, two whatever, going at war with one another. When they experience injustice as a group, that is a society story dynamic. When they experience evil, that's a religion story dynamic. Oh, I remember the Da Vinci Code in a way. So I don't mean religion in the more general way. I mean it when religion is used as a means to control a group of people. And you can think of cults as a religion used to control a group of people. Or does the community experience it via their relationships? And that story dynamic is universal love. And the example there is Mahatma Gandhi, MLK, people who said the idea that we can show universal love for everybody is a specific story dynamic. So for Gladiator, here's how I see the story dynamics. Internally, validation, because of who am I in this pressure? Who am I? And also love, because of the relationships in the movie, and particularly Maximus's desire to go to the afterlife, first to go home, then to go to the afterlife to be with his family. And then in the external dynamic, the societal pressures. Who am I to do this? I'm a prisoner. I could be killed. And also love and action. Those are the external pressures. What matters is not how I categorize the story dynamics or how you do. What matters is how you use story dynamics in your story. For example, imagine if we were watching Gladiator and at the end, instead of killing Commodus, Maximus gets out of the arena, clambers up the steps, grabs Lucilla, says, "Lucilla, let's grab Lucius and run. We're going to the hills where we can be a happy, loving family together." And they leave. That would be very disappointing because that's ending the story on the love story dynamic, which is in Gladiator subordinate to the society and the validation dynamics. We want to see Maximus, one person, standing up against Commodus. We want to see justice done. We want to see societal justice. As always, if you have questions or thoughts, please use the comments so that I can respond. Typically, Story Dynamics generates comments and questions. Don't forget to download the Story Dynamics Quick Guide. Thank you for being here. See you next time when we look more deeply at the 4 internal story dynamics. Tally ho!